Hi, this is a video blog I'm doing for a class that I have called Art and Social Movements, and so I'll just be talking about some articles that I've read and what I think about them. It's not always going to be good, it's going to be my thoughts and feelings about them and whether or not those take me on some kind of tangents. To a certain extent, this is just like a record for myself, and I might even say some like politically fucked up stuff just because it's like you're not always solid first thing in the morning. You know what I mean? So, um, like, none of my opinions are that firm, honestly. So, hopefully, nobody thinks I'm crazy. Anyway, so the first one is Introduction Hyphen-nation Screening Asian Canada. It's from Real Asian, this book. There's the Real Asian video, art, and film festival that we have in Toronto. And it's basically talking about hyphenated identities, like Asian Canadian or African Canadian or American or whatever. And I think the Elaine was basically talking about how it sort of denies it sort of denies like a new context, like a as though you're not just Canadian, like as though Canadian is something other than an Asian Canadian. It's like a version of Canada or something, versus just like the totalitarian of like you're just Canadian and whatever that means is whatever it means. Of course, like nationalism and stuff is a real problem, but in terms of identifying yourself like as a member of a nation and what nation means, I think is problematic, but it's pretty powerful stuff. Nationalism works really well for people. Um, and then she describes the difference between like a dash and a slash, and she gets really far into it semiotically, I think. But I think the cool thing about the slash, like the Canadian slash Asian, is more inclusive. You can be both, right? As opposed to like an other. You are sort of both of these things at the same time, as opposed to this one thing that is distinctly not what everybody else is. So that was interesting. Obviously, I don't really have to struggle with these things, but I like to try to understand them. The other one is Career Imperative Grants for Artists. Just sort of like this is a book that was written by Clive Robertson, and it was he mostly talks about like Canadian art culture, I guess, and how we're funded by the government, which is sort of why it's kind of important to try to like struggle with the nation, what it means to be Canadian, what it means to be these hyphenated things because of our funding structure, where on one hand you don't want to be marginalizing people, but on the other hand people are marginalized and you want to make sure that they get money and stuff to make work. So yeah, it's a tricky potato. Anyway, there's a brilliant in this. They were changing how art funding worked in Canada, where they basically were going to give more money to fewer artists to make sort of like artist superstars or something, as opposed to like this sort of like anybody who wants to be an artist and has certain credentials has the option of trying to apply for these things, which was an entirely, I don't know, I think Canada Council has done some really brave, interesting stuff in the past, and some really non-inclusive, shitty stuff too, right? Sort of nature of the beast. But they were going to make art stars, basically, instead of having like an artist community. And he was just saying that that was fucked up. And there was this awesome calculus, it was, like those things where you turn it, and like for measurements, like when you're doing calculus or whatever, and you have like this number here, and then you turn a thing inside, and then you get another number so you don't have to keep like a slide rule on you and stuff. And they had like funding what your level of education was, and you turn the thing, and I don't know, I thought that was genius. I thought it was really cool. It was an interesting sort of um, intro sort of to the next one, which is this sort of art. It wasn't the next one actually in the list, but it's the Independent Artists Union group that I guess, well, the book was written in Policy Matters, the same book where this guy is talking about artists and changing funding structures in Canada and stuff. But it was a bunch of artists that got together, I guess in like 86 or something, and wanted to make an artists union, and so that your pay would be guaranteed by the government. So you would have a salary and you'd work for the government because you would be creating culture. Because right now, basically all culture that's created is subsidized by the artists themselves. Sort of galling and interesting how every step along the way in terms of like art production and not production, art exhibitions and like having people exposed to these things is paid or subsidized by the government except for the artist. So you know, like museums, gallery owners, all these things have access to grants and stuff like that. The only people that don't really have as good access are the artists themselves. So you have to figure out, how am I going to live, right? You can't just be an artist. You can, but it's like, it's a tricky potato. Most people either are don't have the gall to just be like, I'm just going to be a working artist, and however that works out, it's going to work out. So somebody better pay me or I'm going to starve. Most people have to have like another way to make money, and so that money goes into their art a lot of the times. That's what they need to do, and it's really awful. It's messed up. So the artist union, the problem though, I don't know, the thing is that, like, much like CBC, which I thought was, like, it probably had, like, it had this, like, culture around it that was really interesting to me. And they could take risks on crazy shit, which, like, the Americo, television couldn't really offer. CBC has, I have a soft spot for CBC and their crazy early morning, like, folk singers and stuff. But on the other hand, like, working for the state directly is kind of scary to me, where being guaranteed a salary, of course, most artists or many artists wouldn't allow that to change their politics necessarily, although it would implicitly be a politic, being willing to work for the government, but just, like, working anywhere, right? Like, you make a decision, like, okay, you work wherever it is you work to make money, and that's reality for most people, is that they have to work. But, I mean, some people don't. I mean, they don't work either because they're independently wealthy, or they choose to, like, squat and steal food and stuff. But some people just don't have the energy for that. Like, so it's like, part of me, like, I am left enough to not really think the state is a great idea, in general. But that if there is one, that it should be producing stuff to make, things better, or for everybody, so that the work is fairly made, and the work is good, and people aren't fucking hungry, you know? So that was interesting. So the artist union was cool, and I think artist collectives are amazing, because it's sort of this sort of idea of, like, genius artists in their basement cutting off their ears and eating their paint and stuff really needs to be stopped. So I think collectives, like, you do produce collectively, like, whether you acknowledge it or not. Sorry, you do. So that's what I think about that. And then really quickly, because I'm going to keep this under 10 minutes, Ronaldo Walcott, Black Subjectivities, Ethnicity, Race, and the Politics of Film in Canada, in the book Black Like Who? Writing in Black Canada. He's basically writing about, he's critiquing one film mostly, whose name escapes me, but it was specifically marketed as Jamaican Canadian, so you have that same identifier hyphen that they talked about in the Real Asian Cinema book, and basically just, like, the stereotypes and, like, the problems of being identified as from a specific nation versus just black versus the hyphen. Like, it's a lot of identity stuff going on there, and I'm still trying to get my head around it, so bear with me. Yeah, I'm gonna pause this for a sec and then come back. So that's the first bit of readings. I might come back and forth to readings that I've done already, in these vlogs. So there, I hope that wasn't too repetitive and annoying. Bye.